Well, I imagine Zelensky is happy. He won't be remembered as the most embarrassing spectacle during Trump's tenure anymore. I'm assuming if you click on this, you're aware of the skinny. It was front and center on every news page in the entire world a few days ago, as Trump managed to subject the South African president to the rhetoric of the idiots in Parliament directly to his face in probably one of the most humiliating displays ever seen in the White House. Now, with that being said, being an Afrikaner makes this a tad bit difficult, to say the least. However, I must pull a quote from Gordon Gekko. Don't get emotional about stock, it clouds your judgment. Same thing applies to politics. As such, I will do my best to remain stoic and discuss this in a manner of realpolitik. First, let me just say this, and this goes for politics in general, actually. Humans are first and foremost social creatures and creatures of the environment. Never, ever listen or acknowledge the left as if they're entities that possess any semblance of sapience. They don't. That includes news pundits and journalists, by the way. Why do you think all the headlines said ambush? That's an advertisement. When it comes to South Africa, be aware the first settlers have been there since 1652. It predates the American state. Afrikaners are a mix of Dutch, French, and German. Anyone who doesn't acknowledge the reality of this, write them off. Like that goofy bint on CNN a few days ago who said the Afrikaners can go back to their ancestral lands, probably Germany. Yeah, because modern Afrikaners would do so well in a continent they've not seen in, about 3 centuries, using a language they've never spoken. Well done indeed. When you see that level of ignorant stupidity, think of it like a poisonous plant that farts acid. There is no point in engaging with it. And especially don't bother pointing out the hypocrisy. There is no sense whatsoever in highlighting your enemy is an idiot who doesn't share your values. That kind of goes without saying. Once you see it duct taped down a well, no one cares. The reason for all this nonsense is because people think democracy is real, and everyone's opinion is worthy of being listened to. No, that's bollocks. The masses are morons, and the majority are not fit to engage in politics. If you have a problem with this, take it up with Plato. Same thing applies to those lemmings threatening some sort of violence or whatever against those they deem their political enemy from the safety of their phones. Recognize that for what that is and why. It's social signaling to an in-group to scoop dopamine. That's it. Kind of people who can score an orgasm from binary code. They're insane. Junkies, basically. So when you see these drones, ask yourself, how much of what they believe is part of the current power zeitgeist? And you can really easily tell because nothing in the current power zeitgeist is real. And if you can realize people will cling to beliefs that are utterly unrelated to reality purely for the sakes of more warm fuzzies, then you should know trying to talk to them is pointless. People's beliefs do not come from intrigue and dialogue. No, they come from power. They're products of input, process, output. Your job is not to screw with the process, your job is changing the input. It's not to get them sober, it's to get them on your drugs. With that being said, I want to play something.
You're trying to say that, from what I'm understanding, in third world countries, anything that is not under maintenance is because, you know, we don't care.
No, you care. It's not in the concept. Travel the 54 countries in Africa and ask each person in every country, what is wrong with your country? Leadership. Leadership. All of you say the same word. So let me ask you, since 1960, the country has been picking the wrong leader every 4 years. Not a single railway built by the British is in Nigeria today, but the one they built in their country that same year, it's still running. Not a single railway built in Ghana in 1960 is still there today. What do you know in that country that has been properly maintained by the people every day and it works perfectly?
It's hard for people to maintain things when they're not gaining a lot.
No. It's hard for people to maintain things when they don't have the concept of maintenance in their culture. What is the one word in Igbo for maintenance?
Maintenance is, there's no direct English word for that. It doesn't translate directly to maintenance.
That's correct. How about you?
It doesn't translate.
That's correct.
But it translates to like take care of.
No, that is not maintenance. What is the one word for repair in Igbo?
Imezie.
Exactly. What is the one word for repair in You see, I'm driving you to somewhere. What is the one word for democracy in Igbo language? You don't. How about you? You don't. You're trying to practice something that is not in the concept of the language. There is no African country, and I've done it through Kenya, I've done it all, that has an equivalent of the word maintenance.
Well, in order to maintain something, you have to have it first, correct?
No, if I leave it for you, you can maintain it. The British left a lot of things in this country when they left. They established the hospitals, they established the fire stations, the post offices, the railway lines, the roads they built before they left. You are not able to maintain it because you don't have that concept. Well, because your environment The tropical environment of Africa, the way you build your houses, the material you use, you don't require maintenance. Every country that is called industrialized countries, today one of the things you know about them is maintenance of what they have. That's why we have buildings here that are about 250 years old, 300 years old in this country. There are buildings in other countries of Europe that are 700 years ago. The Notre Dame that burned in France was a 13th century building. Do you know what kept it that long till today? Maintenance is a culture.
Now that guy's name is Frank Zanu. I think Frank's from the Caribbean, actually. But very blunt, very direct. But what's interesting to me is he's talking to two Nigerians there. But if you watch the documentary Empires of Dust about the Chinese railway engineering company working in the Congo, the lead guy, Lau, tells one of the locals who speaks Mandarin, Eddie, straight up says to him, "You were governed by a European country for so long. You should have learned how things work. Experience should be passed on. Only that way you can develop. You went backwards, not forwards. You neglected the things others had left for you. Just like Ghana and Nigeria." How's South Africa's infrastructure looking post-democratic inception, Like Frank said about maintenance, and democracy for that matter as well, the concept is not in the language. You are trying to practice something foreign. There's a book called The African Notebook, written by German physician-theologian Dr. Albert Schweitzer. He wrote in the book, spent his entire life trying to alleviate the suffering of Africans, but came to the conclusion they do not have the mental, intellectual, or emotional ability to equate or share equally with Western civilization. Europeans must retain the position of superior because if you fraternize with them as equals, you and all of your work they will destroy. This was written in the 1950s. There was no talk of Christianity, no talk of liberalism, education, or any other New Age globalist bullshittery. It was a warning that the West chose to ignore. They are not like us. They don't care about our civilization because these are products of our lineage. These are our works. These are our values. They were never going to maintain them because they were never made by them in the first place. Same thing with democracy, by the way. The greatness of Western civilization wasn't built on democracy. Western civilization is great in spite of democracy. Westerners don't even understand democracy. They like it in theory, but they hate it in practice. If that's how Europe feels about it, why the hell do you think it was going to work outside of Europe? The greatness of Europe was built through monarchies. Take a look at the post-colonial world. The only functioning places, South Africa, well, for a time anyway, America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. What do they all have in common? All ruled by Europeans. And everyone knows this. Societies made by Europeans, for Europeans, ruled by Europeans do really well. Shocker. The rest of them, shut the hell. They can't run a first world nation because they're not first world people. The hardware isn't there. The post-colonial project was always going to fail. South Africa's biggest problem is the fact that it is a democracy. More than 80% of the country is non-white. Who's keeping the ANC in power? Idiots and state dependents. Now, if you wanted to retain power, do you know what you don't do? Raise employment and education. Why would you? The moment someone gets money in a liquor sense, they will finger you as corrupt and incompetent, and you will never see power ever again. Why the hell would they do this? A highly competent minority they can conveniently blame for everything, and the parliament can essentially grift off this and maintain power and influence again. Why would they change? Like Frank said, same problem with all of Africa. Leadership. Because
black people cannot rule, black people cannot govern.
Case in point. Skinfolk ain't kinfolk, as the saying goes. Very much the case of South Africa's history, especially if you look at the 1800s during Shaka Zulu's reign. But look at the demographics from a purely power perspective. What would the president gain by being publicly sympathetic to the Afrikaners, politically speaking? Nothing. What do you think he's going to do? Openly admit to what he's been accused of? How do you think that's going to play out? Of course he's going to deny. It's morally reprehensible, of course, but it's the rational course of action if you're a politician being bludgeoned on a global stage. I don't have to agree with it to understand it. Purely from his own pragmatic perspective, he has nothing to gain and everything to lose. Same thing with Malema, by the way, the one Trump showed in the White House. He's not a power broker, he's an imbecile. He's basically the AOC of our politics. Here's the situation. The country is loaded with a horde of, objectively speaking, stupid, unproductive people. That's not up for debate, by the way, that's a fact. They're not the offspring of Western civilization, and they never will be. If you look at the people you're talking about, the concept of equality between them is absurd and ridiculous. Do you think we'll ever have an honest conversation about why, despite decades of economic intervention, it hasn't made a lick of difference in leveling the playing field? Same thing in America. The words and the promises of the ANC are miles away from objective reality. There are those who understand this and those who don't. The ones who do move away from the ANC. The ones who don't are alarmingly stupid and will move from the ANC to the even more radical version of stupidity, the EFF. And Malema knows this, by the way. All he is concerned about is keeping up relevancy. He doesn't give a damn about the people, color regardless. He's just slightly above them in intellect, with a level of corruption that is borderline cartoon villainy. Where it gets concerning, though, is looking at this going, this idiot looked at Zimbabwe and went, hold my beer. And obviously, no one with a functioning brain cell thinks anyone who believes that Palawank is sane or reasonable, and so they would rather get the hell away from it. Understandably so. South Africa has the same problem as every other nation in Africa, leadership and corruption, with an additional variable. The reason I say this is their own people are worse off, and the political class doesn't care about them either. Really, they're just despicable opportunists in the grand scheme of things. What irks my bollocks, though, is the Afrikaners moving and the American left losing their minds, or what left of it they have anyway, as if my kin is supposed to just be alright with calls to violence being sung by sitting members of parliament. Again, none of these scripted drones are to be taken seriously. They're crazy. Now, where I personally disagree with all of this is how this was conducted. It's great American theater, bringing on a world leader to the White House and embarrassing them on a global stage. It makes Trump look like a boss. My problem is, that idiot had to go back to South Africa, and the people do not have the protection of the White House. Those who hold hostile views who the state doesn't care about, how do you think they're gonna react to this? Think about this logically for a second. Any hypothetical policy change that would benefit the Afrikaners would obviously come from this meeting, and more importantly, they would have to admit there was wrongdoing in the first place. Is he going to do any of that? No. Making people aware of the situation isn't going to do jack shit. Anyone who cares already knows. The mid-witted masses are simply up their own arse because Trump raised the issue. Those people who don't like Trump would all stop breathing if he told them he invented oxygen. Everyone knows the reality of this situation. If South Africa was just the Afrikaners, it would be a world superpower. If they all left, it would become a failed state within a matter of weeks. Or maybe it wouldn't. Maybe they'd all be forced to learn Mandarin and say glory to the new leader Xi Jinping. Cheers for watching once again. I apologize for nothing.